thinking.
Yeah.
Kind of
That's
like
nice. Okay.
different brainstorming.
You want to do
If
it
you
like in
stand
one of
here,
this, or?
we have this in the background.
Okay,
It
yeah.
looks really cool.
Yeah, so maybe since you're sort of like when you,
Artist.
I think the first question is about iGEM. So
Okay.
just like you can sort of go into your role as a designer or
Yeah.
an outsider to the biology parts of it, I guess.
I kind of lost your question. No, I found it. Sorry. Okay, so I'll start with the interview because most of the stuff is edited. Introduction doesn't matter. That's what you told me. Okay. Okay, the first question. Why are you personally taking part in the iGEM?
Why? Well, initially because it was a placement related to work, like to design work. So obviously, if I had a role as a designer, not necessarily related to design, but it was like a summer placement. I got paid. It was probably going to look good on my CV, and it was a good experience. But now that I'm in it, it's quite an interesting role. Like to get quite an insight into science and synthetic biology. Like as synthetic biology kind of gains momentum and projects into the future, I think this is going to be a very good thing to have a basis in, and also to meet the people and like just general. Learn.
All right. Okay. Next question. How did you guys come up with your project idea for this year?
It's quite staggered, and I would say it was not very well done.
Really?
But not like in terms of the idea is pretty good and like very solid, but the way in which you went about it, I would say is not ideal. But I would say it's probably a very scientific way of doing it, or a very kind of within the science community. I imagine this is what happens. So everybody went off and they studied and they read papers, and then they came back and they put ideas up in a portal, and then made project proposals themselves. Coming from a design background, I would say that is a terrible way of coming up with ideas. I would say yes, read papers and stuff, but it needs a lot more discussion, a lot more kind of bouncing ideas off each other, understanding why we're even doing this in the first place, and kind of like a good design brief is necessary before we undertake a project. Stuff like that. So with ours, it was literally people taking on individual project proposals themselves, investigating them, and then presenting them to the group, and then we discussing which ones are more feasible.
I see. Okay. All right. Okay. Next question. Biotechnologies like GM food has sparked some controversies in the past. So how do you think synthetic biology is different from that?
It's not.
It's not. Okay.
It's not different from it at all. It's like GM foods have the name because of how it was done. So Monsanto, monopolized the market. They created seeds that were only susceptible to their pesticides, and the seed needed to buy those pesticides, and then you also had a lifespan of a year, so you had to buy a new crop every time, and then. So synthetic biology is no different than genetic engineering, only it's more advanced. It's like a better technique for genetic engineering. So we'll have the same effects, but consequences like, yes, you could say, like I think this is quite interesting because I think we're going to do a lot of stuff about food and the future of food and what we will see as the future of food. And GM foods, like, are probably going to play a huge part in that, and because they can have really good results. But I would say what needs to be done is that there needs to be a lot of policy put in place. And I think that's where it seems that people are anxious towards GM and like genetically modified, and that it's a lot to do with trust and who has ownership of products, and are we going to create crops that can essentially wipe out anything, so it's not bad for our health to eat GM foods, but it's like potentially has massive consequences, and policy and legislation needs to be put in place so that doesn't happen. That would be my opinion on GM foods.
Sure, no problem. Moving on, what do you think is the purpose of iGEM in the field of synthetic biology?
What do I think is perfect? We actually, when we were first kind of trying to come up with a project, we looked at this. So, like, I think synthetic biology, or iGEM, is created in kind of to do a number of things.
Right.
One is to help develop the synthetic biology community, so to train people up,
Right.
because there's no really substantial training at the moment, I think. So like to get people involved in synthetic biology, to get them researching. It's also to develop the registry,
Right.
so to build up a library of standard resources that can then apply to future projects. And what was the last one that we come up with? I can't remember the last one.
Okay.
Yeah, so develop a synthetic biology community and develop a library of resources that can then be utilised in the future,
Right.
so that industry can help out a bit more and stuff.
Right.
So that what I'd see is the purpose of synthetic, or not synthetic biology, but IGEM.
I see. All right. Next question. How do you think synthetic biology could be made more relevant in the society?
Well, does it need to be more relevant? Like, when we talk about human practices,
Right.
I think you need to be thinking, is synthetic, like obviously synthetic biology is really good, but you need to be aware that you shouldn't propagate synthetic biology. It should be more of understanding what society wants, or it should be more acting on one another. So, what was it? There's a question.
How do you think that synthetic biology could be made more relevant in society? So,
to take away the trust issues,
okay.
and kind of, I suppose, in some way, kind of create more dialogue between different groups, and hopefully like encourage a more kind of open approach to it, and looking at what benefits it could have. So GM foods, like if you think about the golden rice in China or in Asia, where they did that vitamin D to the rice, that was a really good application. Or like now the DNA vaccines and stuff.
Which is real.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of stuff is like, it has major implications. So to get people to become more comfortable with it,
Right.
But also not to let synthetic biologists take the reins,
Right.
and to have a bit more discourse and a bit more dialogue and a to and fro, rather than one acting upon the other.
Right.
I would say.
Okay. The last question. Some people are uncomfortable with the idea of using life as a technology. So, what do you think on this?
I think depends on how far you go with it. I think it's like very interesting and it has massive benefits.
Right.
Like recreating organ tissue and stuff. It's very beneficial. I would say that it's quite a it's quite like, I don't know what would happen if you created artificial human life.
Okay.
I don't know, like if you had artificial humans, I don't know how well that would work, or I would say that there's some ethical or moral kind of questions there. But I think in terms of, I don't think there's a massive problem with it. I think that really everything needs to be investigated.
Right. I see. All right. Thanks for your time. That was our interview.
Yeah, thanks.
Got some nice answers. Looking forward to it. And good luck with your team project.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah, see you in Amsterdam, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.